Good morning and welcome to the March 15th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We have a short agenda today. First thing I want to do is acknowledge publicly the passing of Tom Menser last Thursday. He had a short, but I guess it was a pleasant battle because they understood what his cancer was and treated him immediately and for pain. So Tom died from diagnosis to death was probably about 6, 7, 8 weeks. So hopefully he's resting well and helping some other community. Tom's been a big volunteer in our community for decades. He was on the UDC, he was on planning and zoning, he's a hearing officer for code violations. I don't know, George, you may know other committees he was on, but he really dedicated a lot of his time to our community, and a lot that we have, including general plans and the codes, are because Tom helped study them. So kudos to him and thank him for having been here. A lot of us, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Tom, and I really appreciate much of what he did. So with that said, I want to remind everybody that we have 2 council members here today instead of starting the meeting without acknowledging them. Jim Lamerson, a 16, 17-year member of the council, and junior, Phil Good is here. Young man. Good to see a smile, Phil. Thank you. We have our commission members, and I'll actually, let's start from Bill, and you go ahead and just introduce yourself for the members in the audience and at home.
Yeah, Bill Sim, 25-year resident, and happy to be a member of this board.
George Sheets.
Jared Nanke.
Joe Gardner.
Terry Marshall.
And I'm Ken Mabarak. So thank you, guys. Let's get right into it. We have one agenda item change, and that's the minutes, reading of the minutes and approval of the minutes. We're going to wait until next time because they wanted to get all 3 prior meetings that we had together at one time, and they're still working on the February one. So we're going to postpone our regular agenda item 3. Let's get right into we really have just one property today to deal with, although there's 2 requests on it. One is a rezoning from business general to downtown business for a portion of the property, and the other thing is a site plan review. And I actually have a couple of questions on these 2, if they're for staff. Can these be voted on separately? Do these go? Are they hand in hand? What are we doing with these? I noticed one was an agenda item, and the other was a what do you call it? A memo.
You can vote on them in one. It would be 2 separate actions. I can give one presentation. We can go through any questions, and then you can vote on each separately in one swoop.
Okay, so they can be handled individually.
They're concurrently, but they're 2 separate actions.
One of the reasons I asked that at this point, I just want to say, I couldn't read the site plan. I couldn't read the plan that's attached to the second agenda item, which is the site plan review. I don't know if anybody else has.
I had a difficulty. We went up and set up on the site and tried to figure out what we were looking
It's very difficult to, even on an acre site, to address what we're looking at on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I had a magnifier, and I've just had dual cataract surgery, so I can see without glasses 22/20. So this was very difficult, and I would hesitate for us to vote on this if I don't mind discussing it, but I think I'm probably going to recommend that we postpone a vote on it if we can, because I didn't know anything about this. And I'd hate to vote on it without having specific knowledge. So if you think about that, but we can go right into, George, if you'll think about that, we can go right into the rezone section. So, Katie, why don't you lead us off?
All right. Also, I do have a large copy of the site plan here today. I don't know if that helps, but I can also blow it up on the overhead as I go through it, and we've got a large copy too.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so this is a consideration of a rezone for 2 of 3 parcels, and this is located at the Catholic Charities property at the corner of Gurley and Summit Avenue. So I'll pull that up. There's a glare on that. There we go. So it's just east of Summit on the north side of Gurley Street. At the front currently is a historic building that's currently used for office space. And behind that to the north is the church. There's a parking lot immediately behind this building. So the parcel that's facing Gurley Street is the one that's zoned downtown business currently. The 2 lots that make up the property behind the building, the parking lot and that structure at the north end of the site are both zoned business general currently. Their plan is to combine all 3 lots into one.
Katie, one more time, the parts, the small pieces that are not zoned downtown business are in back of the,
Yes, right here, so this is the one zoned downtown business.
uh-huh,
And then the parking lot area and this area toward the north end are both business general.
so the
zoned
parking lot
currently.
and that building at the end of the parking lot?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And so the proposal is to rezone those 2 northern parcels to downtown business, so that when the site is all combined into one parcel in time for the building permit review, it'll all be zoned downtown business. So this would allow in the future also, down the road, it'll be zoned downtown business. Any uses that would be allowed in downtown business zone would then be allowed on those parcels. So this part of the presentation is really pretty basic. It's just looking at the zoning aspect. The surrounding zoning, if you look here, to the north and northwest is zoned multifamily. South and southwest are business general, downtown business, and to the east, downtown business zone. So the proposal is to zone those 2 parcels consistent with the 3rd one that are part of that site to be consistent with the zoning, pretty much the east and south of the site.
What is the property that is to that musical place that's just to the east of this property? What is that zoned?
Which one is,
The white roof next to your orange, the big, right there.
I don't recall what that zone is exactly. It's either downtown business or business general, I
Yeah,
believe.
that's what I was looking to find
Yeah.
out. And the church area and the school behind it is all zoned business general?
The zoning up here to the north and northwest are multifamily.
Thank
So
you.
that's the zoning underlying the existing uses. That's more to the south and east that we have the business
Is it
zones.
downtown business directly across the street?
Downtown business is directly across the street,
Thank you.
yes.
Okay.
So it's pretty much surrounded by multifamily to the west and north and business general and downtown business to the south and east. So because of the surrounding zoning and the zoning of the parcel facing the street, staff would consider the proposal for rezone of those two parcels from business general to downtown business to be consistent with the surrounding zoning. And it would make sense. What their proposal is for an additional building to be constructed at the rear of their site that would cross some of the property lines. So it would make sense to rezone those 2 from business general to downtown business so that the one site is all one zone, to combine the parcels and to rezone them.
Okay.
Did you have any other questions right now about the zoning part, or should I get into the site plan?
I'd like to keep them separate if we could.
Okay.
I noted that you had the site plan with the zoning.
Yes.
Let me back up. Let me ask my fellow commissioners. Just because I was not able to understand what they're trying to put here doesn't mean that you guys didn't. So if you're comfortable talking about the site plan, I'm more than willing to allow that. I just don't know, I don't know what's on this paper, and I can't do it this quick.
We do have a presentation by the applicant that may help with some of that. So if you
Right.
would indulge us, perhaps we'll go ahead and let him do his presentation and then decide whether you're willing or able to pursue the site plan at this time.
Well, George, thank you. My question is, do we have to discuss the site plan when we discuss the zoning?
No, we generally try to keep all parts of a particular project together for review purposes. That's why they're both on the same agenda.
Commissioners, do you have any objection if we deal with the zoning portion and then deal with the site plan later? Can we approve a zoning? Are you comfortable approving a zoning without a site plan?
Yeah, I think so.
I do have a question.
Terry?
Back to the zoning, across the street, how deep does the downtown business district go on Summit, on the west side of Summit?
How deep is the,
How many properties? I know there's multifamily.
To-
farther north.
to the north, so you're asking to the south?
If we could go back to the other site plan, Katie.
The aerial map?
Yeah.
You're talking about
Mhm.
I'm talking about directly across the street on the west side of Summit, going north, how deep is the downtown business?
Here?
Or how is that zone from where it says multifamily back to Gurley? How are those properties done?
You're referring to this property, these properties?
No, above. Above Gurley, going north.
So here?
Subject sites.
I believe, so, let's see.
I thought you were looking for punch point. Here. I got here. That's not downtown. That's
Remember
multi.
that?
It's all multifamily.
Comment on that,
Gurley.
and if that doesn't work.
There it is, yes.
So the properties in red are business general, they're commercial zoning. Behind that commercial zoning, which runs all the way over to Grove Street, and north of that area is multifamily residential zoning.
So back to my question, is the property right on the corner of Summit and Gurley on the northwest corner, is that downtown business or business general or multifamily?
Business general.
Right on the corner is business general, and then just behind that,
Does that go, just a single property?
It's just that single property. Beyond that, it's multifamily residential.
That was my question.
I have
George?
Yes, if the business general versus the downtown business, does downtown business waive both the parking requirements and then allow a higher density in terms of the number of residential units can be on the property? I guess the question is, why rezone? Is it the parking and the number of units?
part of the reason to rezone is simply because it will be the three parcels will make up one site, and there will be a building that will straddle lot lines. So you'd have a building that would have two different zones. So that's one of the reasons that it makes sense. The downtown business zone does waive parking for some kinds of uses. So the hospitality-related uses like restaurants, hotels, retail.
But not residential.
Waive parking. Residential does still have parking requirements for downtown. Yes. And they do have parking planned for the site for this current project proposed. As far as the zone, there are some.
They have parking, but they're using the church's parking, which is not within the contained parcels that we're speaking of. So I guess the downtown business waives that requirement to have on-site parking. Isn't that correct?
For the housing portion of this project, there's still parking required for the housing. Future projects, depending on the use, would still require parking, or it may waive the parking. So in the future, if some other project comes into this site under the downtown business zoning, if it was hotel or retail or certain types of uses related to the hospitality uses, then the parking would be waived. If it was another residential project, parking would be required. In the future, if it was another project that came in 10 or 20 years down the road.
That's not the one that's coming in, so
Right.
do we really have to rezone this? I mean, I understand the mixed zones, but I've seen that all over the city, where we have mixed zoning within areas, overlapping parcels.
Yeah, we do have that all over, and I have to tell you, I don't mind on this particular one. I'll tip my hand here. I don't mind making those two smaller parcels with the total, what, 2/10 of an acre? Is it a little more than that?
Each one, I think, is 0.17 acre. Yeah, so
So
it's,
you got a third of an acre that's not zoned
Right.
downtown business, and the remaining.
right, it's a fairly small parcel.
I don't have a
lot.
big problem having this parcel be downtown zoning, downtown business.
This is basically the area. So on the right here is the back edge of the existing building on Gurley, the parking lot in the middle, and then the small structure in back. So this is it looks like one lot from the street. It's not a large area.
This one, I remember the site very well. This was Dr. Macaulay. Anyway, I remember I had emergency handwork done there 15 years ago. Actually, it was 18 years ago, because I had to have a tetanus shot. And they said, you'll always remember when you had a tetanus shot, because it was the year 2000. But I don't necessarily have a huge problem with the downtown zoning on this parcel. I have more of a problem with this is the second case we've had of adding to the downtown zoning district without really looking at the downtown zoning district. I hope we don't end up with spotty, I don't mean spotty, but meandering zoning for the downtown district. I really like to see our city sit down and define where the downtown district is. Because we had a case over on, at the end of McCormick and Goodwin Street that we added to the downtown zoning district. And that business that was in the anticipation of going in there never came in. So I remember saying at that time, I'd like to see us look at our downtown district and really define what that is and treat it that way. I think that's a good business decision for perhaps us to get engaged in. Do we have any other questions about the downtown district?
No, not about the downtown, but
Go ahead, Terry.
I do have a question about the parking. And I couldn't figure out how they're gonna get access from this particular site to the school parking lot or the church parking lot. Where's that access?
I believe the proposals that the access would be separate. So they have some proposed parking on site. Would you like me to get into some of the details of the site plan to review what's proposed? I can go over their proposal for the parking.
Mr. Chairman, you were trying to keep these separate items. If you want to blend them together, we're able to allow the applicant to do his presentation and blend them together for
It sounds
discussion
like
purposes.
I've got an uphill battle separating them. So
It probably doesn't do them any good to just get half of it today anyway.
well, it
So
probably doesn't, but I certainly don't mind giving them the zoning, but I have questions about the site plan. But sure, let's go ahead and do it the way it
Let's
was
let him do his
planned. You betcha,
presentation.
George. Thank you.
Yes, some of the zoning-related questions get into the site plan in more
They do,
detail,
yeah.
so.
I think I might have been just getting pouty the night before last when I read this and couldn't read it, so I think I might have had a little tantrum.
So this is the architect, Douglas McCord, and did you have someone else presenting? Okay.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Steve Kapobers. I'm Vice President of Business Development for Catholic Charities down in Phoenix. Appreciate you looking at this project for us. This was actually initiated by the church. They approached us about the need for additional classroom space. And so we started talking about what we could do, and it made sense to take a look at a redo of the entire office. So I think what you'll see from Doug is a good compromise on what we could possibly do. So, Doug?
Thank you, guys. Thanks for, I know this is a special meeting for the Planning Commission. And I just want to thank Katie and George and Darla and the whole staff here. They've been really, really good to work with. Leslie and Leah and Bianca and Don. I mean, it goes on. So they've been very accommodating. Just a quick, Catholic Charities has owned
Could
this
you give us
property.
your name and
Oh, my
address,
name's
sir?
Doug McCord. I'm a principal at Architectural Resource Team. Been working on this project with the staff here for about 4 or 5 months, trying to get this to go. You guys have owned the property 2001?
Yeah, we bought it in 2001.
Yeah. They don't plan on leaving anytime soon. And Steve used to be the director of Arizona Department of Housing. And so part of their mission is affordable housing, and this one is affordable housing with an emphasis on housing for seniors and veterans. And so, yeah, bringing it all together, the zoning request is part of it, part of its density, part of it's the combination of the parcels. I mean, if we, because of the property is, actually the middle property is split zoning, so we're asking for 1.5 parcels to be zoned all the same to DTB. And it gives us about 8 more units on site than a combination of business general and DTB. And
Could you explain why there'd be 8 more units allowed under downtown business?
It's just how the calculation works between business general and DTB. I don't know it in my head. I think the combination of them was about 43, and if it's all DTB, it's up to 51. And the challenge with the funding that we are seeking for this project is through low-income housing tax credit with ADOH. It's very difficult to make those projects work even under 60 units. And so we're trying to make this work with 51 units, and part of that is being in partnership with the church and providing them some facilities. They're providing us with some parking, and so trying to make the 2 parcels kind of work together with supportive services and everything together. Let's see so I think this map shows a little bit better where the DTB is, and where the business general is that sort of light salmon color. The DTB is all the red. And George and I talked about why that line's through the middle of that parcel, and he goes, I wasn't here at the time, so, so someone drew a line across there. It just happened to go through the middle of the middle parcel. So those 3 parcels there are all owned by Catholic Charities, which backs up to the school and the church.
Yeah, I think that's a good graphic.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just looking at that, I think the zoning request is reasonable. I do have site plan questions.
Sure, and I'll get into that here in just a second. I thought this would be helpful. And
Thank
so
you for that.
the parking that we're wanting to, Steve's working on an MOU right now with the parish, and because their large parking lot just to our north, this laser doesn't quite show up. Their large parking lot to the northeast, is empty 5-6 days a week, and so to share the staff parking for the folks working on site makes a lot of sense, and I'll show you on the site plan how we're going to connect those 2. Traditionally, in this type of housing, which Catholic Charities would own for at least 30 years in its current affordable status, and probably much beyond that, as that's their mission, those people tend to drive cars at about a 1-to-6 ratio, usually is what we usually see. And being seniors and being veterans, you don't really want them driving anyway. And they would be well, we deal with a lot of folks with disabilities too.
He's pulling his gun out, right?
Well, generally the population, we do deal with a lot of folks with disabilities too. So generally a lot of them are not driving. And they would provide services and transportation on site for them. So the site plan, after working with staff many rounds, and coming to the conclusion that the existing building on site is on the historical register, we're proposing to remove a small portion of that existing building, keeping all the facade and everything intact so that the historical look of that property remains, as well as the two very large cedar trees, which were most likely planted when that building was built. They're Deodorus cedars, and they're got to be
Beautiful.
at least 50, 60 years old. And then we'll wrap, the back of the site there is right at the top of this graphic. We'll wrap this property with the multi-purpose classrooms, a new lobby, support space, community space, and then units. And the piece that comes down on the right-hand side there is only going to be 3-story. We'll have 4-story as it butts up against the school. The school sits probably 8 to 10 feet above us. So we're going to be probably elevation-wise very similar to what the school is right now, because it sits up high above us. We've sort of maximized the parking on site. I think we're getting 24 parking spots on site, as shown right there. And then the second story, which our plan is, I cut it off just so you could see it, but we're planning on a bridge or crosswalk there to connect that back parking to this building so that the folks who park up above with the church, they can come into the building at that level and take stairs or elevator down and be connected to the rest of the site very easily.
Where is that? Can you point that out?
Yeah, imagine this floor plan back, it's the same floor footprint, but this connection right here at the very top, connects back to if I go back to the aerial, so it will connect back in this area. And we haven't worked all the details out, but I know we can figure something out there. I mean, I know the concern of the staff would be, having to go downstairs, especially when it's icy or something back there. So we want to make that a level transition, and anyone that's disabled or needs help or has mobility challenges, that would also help them out to come in at the second level and then take an elevator down to the first level, which would be on level with the existing office building.
How big of you're talking 50, how many units?
51.
51?
Mostly one bedrooms. There's a few 2 bedrooms on site.
How many square feet is that building?
It's about 44,000 total. No, 44,000 is our part of it. There's about 5,000 that is multi-purpose classroom on the first floor. So it has a footprint that's roughly 16,000 square feet.
Okay. I truly wish I was better informed as to the site plan. I feel terrible having this meeting today and not even knowing where you have that bridge. I just don't feel prepared to deal with all the details of this. It's good to learn it, so if we can study it maybe at some time. But I wasn't even able to. I had my magnifier out too, and it didn't work. So go ahead.
Well, of course, we would appreciate a vote on the site plan today. For the LIHTC application, all we need is the zoning confirmed.
For which application, sir?
The low-income housing tax credit application, which is due 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now.
Mm-hmm.
For that application to be successful, all we need is the zoning confirmed, which is the first course of action, and then we need our will serve letter, which by the council's resolution Tuesday, we're good with the will serve letter coming from Leslie Grazier.
For water, you're referring to
For
will
water,
serve
water
for
and
water?
utility, yeah.
And I do have a few questions on me. So the required parking's 92,
Correct.
but with the agreement with the church, you have 149. Why is that?
Just to show you guys that we have more than abundant parking.
Okay. And does the church and school still have adequate parking if they commit, whatever it is, 100 spaces to this use, whatever number they're giving up?
For their use during the week, yes. because
But
it's not high school classes there, so there are no children driving to the, or no students, I shouldn't say children. No
I think I'm
students
asking
driving
that
to
question
the
of staff, is there an issue with, the church says fine to use the parking, but, it does it meet our requirements? That's the question on that one. And I got some others too.
We've also provided the flexibility for them to apply for a special parking agreement with the community development director. So under the code, for uses that have slightly different parking demand, we can provide that. So considering that this would be a veterans housing project and the demand for parking would be a lot lower than a lot of other multifamily housing projects, we consider the parking that they have proposed to be adequate. And if necessary, we can use the code provisions to have an agreement with them to approve their proposed parking based on using a different parking demand analysis that would be similar to other kinds of uses. It's a little different than other multifamily housing.
Not really getting my question answered, but it would be nice to see what the existing calculations are for the church and the school for their, is it tight by our regulations? Is there excess? I realize that, the main use is on Sunday, and so that's not really I'm not saying this isn't a good idea, but what I'm saying is how does it fit with our current zoning in numbers, square footage numbers, that sort of stuff?
Mr. Chairman, we did check that.
Okay.
If this use were in full use and occupied all of the required parking for the site, the church would still have more than sufficient use for its required parking.
Okay.
That changes a little bit if they actually fill up all of the 100 and some odd spaces that they're proposing to cover under the MOU. But I think they're giving themselves a buffer rather than trying to account for spaces they don't need. In the case of both buildings at full capacity and with the parking at maximum, both uses meet our code requirements.
Okay.
George, I think the church is doing some expansion of its facility there as we speak. I don't know what they're doing. I just know there's a big addition being added on there. I don't know what that's going to do to their existing parking.
It does not increase the existing parking.
It does not.
Those plans have already been reviewed and approved by us. There's a building permit issued.
Right,
So
but
we check that as part of the permit request.
is it very? It's got to be pretty unusual because I've not heard of one owner making an agreement, your memorandum of understanding with the church. I haven't seen that before.
We actually have a number of them, mostly
Yeah.
in the downtown. Church parking lots generally sit empty.
Sure.
One of the things we talked about, if you recall, I hate to bring up the term Deepwell Ranch again, but if you recall the discussion during Deepwell Ranch, one of the issues that we from staff liked about the entire proposal was that they had a complete shared parking agreement process, a shared parking agreement process established in there, which we think is very appropriate. City governments tend to require far more parking spaces of businesses than the businesses require, in most cases. Not all, but in most. So in those cases, allowing people to alternate or share the parking usage depending on times of day and maximum use periods makes a lot more sense geographically as well as, for the economy and for everything else, to not have parking spaces that no one ever parks in or only
I
parks
think
in
the
at Christmas
concept's
time.
a brilliant one, especially in congested areas and downtown areas would certainly qualify.
Yes, so I know of at least 4 shared parking agreements in the downtown. 3 of them involve churches and their parking spaces.
Yeah, and George, I think for the record, what I would like to see as part of the package is, here's the number of spaces required by the school, here's the number by the church, here's the total number, so we get an idea. If I were doing this, I don't think I would tie the church up to these additional spaces. I mean, if 92 is required, personally, I'd
Only
show
tie up
92,
92,
not 149. But that's, only so that 10 years from now, when the church adds on again, they're not hamstrung. So The other question, the other concern is the location of the trash dumpster, which is off the, it's in the front, well, side yard, front yard, but it's in Summit. It's not even on the parcel. And I think that's a bad spot for it, bad, have it in the yard off of the property. I think the design should, maybe the trash enclosure.
Is that in the right of way?
Yeah.
Is that a right of way there?
Yeah,
It is. It's in the edge of the right-of-way on Summit.
yeah.
This is probably not going to sound right, but a lot of times, us being able to get our very large garbage truck in to pick up a dumpster is the single driving force for a site layout.
I
That's
agree.
the consideration before you site the building, before you put the parking spaces in, and before you put driveway in. This works better for us than any other location that they offered. So our sanitation folks preferred it because we can get in and out without blocking 2 lanes of traffic and without trying to maneuver in a parking lot. So that's how it ended up on there.
Where's the churches? Can it be up? Is there one in the
Yeah,
church parking lot?
It's at the
So
north
there
end
could
of the,
conceivably be another one in the church parking lot.
well, it's not in the parking lot for the church. It's the north end of their site, the church site.
Well, anyway, I'm just, to have a garbage enclosure in the right of way, on the street, where everybody will see it, it just, I don't care for that.
Understood.
And, let the trash people drive a little farther.
Oh, my God, I hope they didn't hear that. George is absolutely right about trash. Apparently, trash dumpsters do drive the design. We had a situation on a project that that I'm involved in that I said, God, everything's great except the trash dumpster, and 4 staff members piped up and said, that's where they want it, and that's where they're going to get it. So it really becomes a deal. It's kind of like the fire department. They keep getting bigger trucks, so we need more space for them. And it does dominate. Usually they're very prominent these days.
And
Any more questions for them? Joe?
No.
If I could add, we did work with staff on that location, and we will provide, full enclosure and gates, and it won't look any worse than an electrical transformer sitting out at the street. So,
Just taller.
just a little bit taller. Yeah. 6 foot instead of 4. yeah.
I don't agree
Yeah.
with that assessment. And
I understand.
in big cities, they are often actually in the building. I mean, and not that that's great, but.
That was our first proposal,
Yeah.
so they shot
So-
that one down.
And, I mean, I don't think that, especially the downtown, I don't think that the trash dumpster should be the guiding thing. And like I said, you do have the big parking lot above of the church, and I don't see a reason why it can't be on that.
Terry, you had a question?
So, but anyway, that's my opinion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir. Finish your presentation.
That's really all I have, unless you guys have more questions.
Well, I see you've all put a lot of work into this. Staff certainly has. I'm not prepared to vote on the site plan today. I hope that doesn't foul things up.
I have a question. When I checked, we hurried this meeting up for some reason. Is there some timetable that you're struggling with?
That is the zoning that we were talking about. I think their application to the Department of Housing for the grant requires some action on the zoning prior to that application being submitted. If you take action on the zoning today, it can go to the city council, and the council can take action on the zoning, and that will meet their timeframes for the application. Otherwise, they will be unable to apply this year for the housing grant.
Yeah. George, you have a question?
Yes, at Tuesday at council, the question was asked to the church's representative regarding the existing structure there and whether they are going to keep it all or whether there's going to be some changes or that be involved. And he said that was not yet known at that time. Has that now been firmed up to where you know for sure about the old building?
I can't say that for sure yet because we really have to do a structural analysis to see if we can remove part of it. I mean, we're talking about probably 6, 7 parking spaces that are up in the air on site, depending on the structural ability to remove part of that building.
Okay.
So that's impacts the site plan too.
Right.
It does, it
Yeah.
does. I'd like to get back to what I talked about earlier, and let's, so you're saying that in order to get your funding application rolling, you must have the zoning in place, or it must be promised?
As long as George can sign the form, we're good. But we do, I mean, we are going in to the state with a proposal for 51 units with this site plan. And as long as we follow general conformance and can provide 51 units, should the project get awarded, then we're good.
Okay. Again, I'm hearing a lot of questions about the site plan. And maybe it's just our ignorance at this moment here at 9:30 on this Thursday. It may be a great site plan, but I certainly can't figure it out right now. There seems to be some questions with the bridge, with the trash thing, taking part of the building down. I think we'd be remiss in recommending to council something that we're not fairly sure of. I think part of our task, mandate, is to give city council a recommendation based on the facts that we have, and it seems like we don't have enough of them available to us right now. I really would like to see if George, you think I wouldn't mind calling a vote for the zoning if you think that would help our situation here.
You can take action independently.
Can we separate them?
Yes,
Go
they're-
ahead and work on the zoning.
They're two separate items for voting, so you can vote on one without the other.
Does that get them the timing they need?
I think if you take action on the zoning today, yes.
Yeah, I think that's wise, and as Jared and I talked about earlier, that way we wouldn't get struck by lightning here this morning, working
I
on denying
think-
a church everything.
I think the zoning request is reasonable, but I think there is a slight chance that, we'll turn down the site plan. And again, from not being able to read the plan, I didn't see the removal of the building to pick up, a few more parking spaces, 7, anyway, whatever the number was. Given that, what's the number that you're over? 57 spaces that you're over, then, if you're over 57, why be concerned about the few more spaces you get by taking off part of the building? The thing that I like the most about the site plan is saving the existing building. I mean, I think it's totally conceivable somebody come in and bulldoze the building, start from new, get more, a higher use of the property. So I think, from my perspective, saving the existing building is important.
And we had a couple plans that showed the building gone. So, and I think we'll have to do some economical studies to see is it worth it to take that building down, the cost to repair it, and versus the 7 parking spaces. So that's definitely not done yet.
Well, it sounds like we're premature on the site plan anyway, in some cases, because we don't know exactly what's going to be there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder that it is a public hearing today, so once we're done with the applicant's presentation, you may want to open it up to the public.
You bet.
Not sure if there's any public comment or not, but just for the
bet.
record.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. Let's take a little poll here about the site plan situation. Do we want to separate the site plan and vote separately on the site plan versus the zoning?
I vote for that.
Joe?
Yeah.
I think we're gonna do that. I hope that doesn't follow up some of the plans you've had, but it's just, I wouldn't be able to do the job we get paid so highly to do. I think Mr. Padaki is right. Let's open this meeting up to the public. Does the public have any comments? None? That's great. That's great. All right. In reference to the zoning, I look at that zoning, and as I mentioned, I have trouble with just adding pieces to the downtown zoning. But in this particular case, I think it's pretty clear. It's confined geographically on 2 sides. The north side and the east side are pretty much separated. I think the two lots that the Catholic Charities owns behind this office, the medical your building, are fine. I'd have no trouble with this whole site being downtown business zoning. It really makes little difference. It does make the difference in parking primarily. So I wouldn't, I'd certainly entertain a motion if somebody wanted to talk about the zoning and have more of a discussion about it. I'd be open to that.
Question?
No, no
No.
question. I was
Okay.
going to make the motion.
Go ahead.
I move for approval of agenda item PLN 18-00001.
Second,
Is there a second?
it's a little different than the motion in the,
Yeah, let's,
is that,
let me get to the zoning thing.
Oh. Okay. And this is to approve a rezone of 2 contiguous .17 acre parcels from business general to downtown business.
Is there a second?
second?
Thank you. Do we have some discussion about that?
I have a question.
Mr. Marshall?
Are we going to set a precedent now, maybe going north from the northwest corner, since we're rezoning this piece? Is that going to entice owners of the properties across Summit to come in to rezone those, either business general or downtown?
You bet. I think it will. I think anytime you zone something more liberal across from me, I'm going to say, well, let me have it too. But I think that's a risk you have in not having
Mr.
a
Chairman, and-
vivid downtown zoning plan.
There is nothing in zoning theory or zoning practice that prevents someone from asking to change their zoning. So you're not setting a precedent. There's already a precedent that anyone can ask to change their zoning. It's their right. We don't have to grant changes to zoning, and that's the council's decision as to whether or not that's appropriate. And your position is to recommend whether it's appropriate or not. I don't think you have to worry about creating a precedent, because you're immediately bumping into residential zoning to the north, and a conversion from residential to the highest intensity use the city has seems like it's unlikely to occur.
And we do have schools next to downtown business zoning already. At the Mile High Middle School backs up to, or part of it is in downtown zoning district. So, well, with that, any other discussion on this item? With that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Looks like you passed unanimously for the zoning. Pardon me, sir? No lightning today. Thank you, thank you. It's a big day for some of us. We don't want to die early. Again, I want to apologize to our applicant that we're just ill-prepared to deal with all the issues that you presented. And it sounds like you have more issues that you're going to be dealing with as you go through this and making your plan for the building and its use. So I like your use. I don't know how you determine on these buildings that it will be seniors and/or veterans, but there must be some mechanism in the financing agreements that call for that. I like the use. I think it's a great location for that type of use. So that's good, but I apologize to you for not being able to.
Mr. Chairman, if your intention is to defer action on the site plan, you can defer it to your next regularly scheduled meeting, which will be
The 29th, Thursday, the 29th.
Well, we'd have to have more information, you know.
Yes, so
It's
we
not
would-
just
we
a
would-
matter of studying it more here.
We would include additional information if it's available for
Yeah,
your
because it
packet
sounds
at
as
that
if,
time.
and maybe it's a question for the applicant also, it sounds as if you still are finalizing plans on your building.
I just think it's an issue of looking at the structure. I just think we have to get a structural engineer to look at the building to see what we can do and what we can't do. I mean, that's our issue right now.
Okay. Well, with that being said, then let's, can we just postpone it to a future date? I'm not sure they're going to be ready, George, by the 29th.
Yes, so you can defer action or table it until that date. Again, we generally ask you to establish a date certain.
But I'm just,
we usually ask them to establish a date certain is because we usually keep the public hearing open,
Sure.
because it's usually a rezoning. But this is not a public hearing, so you can just move to table it, and when it's ready, we'll let you know.
I'd prefer that. Terry?
Can we request full-size site plans?
Yes.
Was this, is the 11 by 17 adequate, the one they gave us today?
I don't think so. I'd like to see it so we don't have to use a magnifying glass to
Okay.
read the small print.
At the risk of embarrassing myself, I'm going to ask Jared if he could read the whole thing.
No, I could not.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want them to know that you want when they make the next presentation?
You bet. We can-
Other
we can-
than what we've already gleaned from the prior
This would be
discussion?
the time to.
You want a
think
bigger,
about that.
large-scale,
We
map,
want bigger.
site plan.
Bigger is always better.
and all the additional information that we
Thank you.
picked up? Okay.
Councilman?
Thank you very much. One of the issues that we discuss is land use, and then we look at what's good for the entire community with land use, et cetera. One of the questions that I would hope would be resolved within the planning structure before it comes to council is the percentage that we're talking about with regards to veterans, regard to senior citizens, et cetera, so that we have some full understanding what the 51 units are going to be actually used for or committed to. So I would hope to see that somewhere to where my fellow council members can also relate to what we're actually talking about when we're changing some of the downtown to accommodate something.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's the only thing that I have. I think it's a wonderful type thing to take care of our vets. I think it's a wonderful type thing to take care of our senior citizens. I know that we have a lot of disabled people in the area. You know, there are protected classes, and the idea of having housing available within walking distance to the cultural center of the community, within the walking distance of shopping and things like that makes a lot of sense. So, you know, I think Catholic Charities is doing something very good for the city. Just like to know what we're committing to and what they're committing to.
Exactly.
All
Thank
right.
you. That's exact. Well put. That was my sentiments exactly.
When you apply for these credits, you have to indicate what kind of population you're going to serve. And so in this case, we want to serve all elderly or over 55 in age.
I'm
And
not
what
impressed.
happens, there's a land use restriction that's actually recorded with the deed that goes with that land. So, and the restriction is for 30 years. So for 30 years, we have to serve seniors. Now, in addition to that, we're going to take 30 of the 51 units and dedicate them to veterans. So the same thing, the land use restriction will also indicate a further restriction of 30 units for veterans. And what we're also committing to is we're going to provide rental assistance to those 30 units for the veterans. Catholic Charities is in the middle of a capital campaign to raise money, and we're committing part of that capital campaign to at least 15 years of rental assistance for veterans. So that's basically the project.
Thank you. And could you, when you come back, could you provide that language for us about the use,
The
the
land use
senior and the
restriction-
veteran use, and what the restrictive language in your financing would be, so we could have that language also to be?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you
I
very
have
much.
a question. Yeah, the veterans, is that all ages of veterans and not just over 55 veterans?
It would be over 55. Yeah, the entire property is elderly restricted, and then the additional overlay of veterans for the 30 units.
And when you come back, could you just refer to over 55 and not elderly?
Okay. Hey, I hear you.
Thank you. That'd be wonderful. Some of us would very much appreciate that. You will eventually. With that, I don't know that we have anything else on the agenda, Matt.
You officially need to make the motion to table site plan review in association with Border Service Agreement 17-028 and take a vote on that.
Okay.
Can I say a so moved?
You can.
Language you want.
Yeah.
That's good language, yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're good to go. Anything else, George, you want to talk about in the city? Any past actions?
nothing that I'm aware of to give you a update on. No, sir.
Okay, with that, I think we're done here. Thank you all.